Hey guys, welcome to Skeleton Guy Stories. Tonight's story will make you think twice about the people around you. What if someone you knew wasn't really them? What if something else was wearing their face? Turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin. The warning: don't look at their faces. Last night I counted 32 teeth in my ID badge photo. This morning I counted 38. I've been a doctor at St. Mary's General Hospital for 6 years, and until 3 days ago, I never thought twice about hospital ID badges. Now I can't stop staring at them, at the way the faces seem to shift when you're not looking directly at them, at the impossible changes in the details. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I should tell you about Margaret Chen first, about how she smiled at me in the parking garage with too many teeth, about how she tried to warn me about my car, even though she'd retired months ago, about how I saw 3 different versions of her talking to each other in the cafeteria yesterday. But most importantly, I should tell you why I'm leaving St. Mary's tonight and never coming back, why I've booked a flight to another country, why I'm writing this warning, because they're learning to wear our faces better now, and they're getting hungry for new ones. St. Mary's isn't like other hospitals. On the surface, it looks normal enough. A sprawling medical complex that's been expanded and renovated so many times it's become a maze. The original structure dates back to 1923, all worn marble floors and vintage tilework, with newer wings added over the decades. But between the modern sections and the old building are the forgotten places, abandoned corridors sealed off during renovations, old wards that don't appear on any current blueprints, and spaces that seem to shift when no one's looking. I've worked night shifts in the emergency department since I started here. You get used to the strange sounds hospitals make after dark, the hum of fluorescent lights, the distant squeak of wheels on linoleum, the soft whir of medical equipment. But St. Mary's has different sounds, different stories. Not the usual tales of ghostly patients or haunted rooms. These are stories about something else, something that studies us, something that wears familiar faces. It all started 3 nights ago. We were severely understaffed due to a flu outbreak that had taken down half our regular crew. I was nearing the end of my 3rd consecutive night shift, running on nothing but coffee and stubbornness. The exhaustion had dulled my instincts, made me slower to notice the warning signs. The first incident happened around midnight. I was checking patient charts at the nurses' station when I caught a glimpse of Margaret Chen walking past the medicine storage room. Nothing unusual about that, except Margaret had retired last year after 3 decades as our head pediatric nurse. I blinked, assuming my tired mind was playing tricks on me. When I looked again, the corridor was empty. 2 hours later, I saw her again, or someone wearing her face, sitting at the far end of the cafeteria. She was wearing her familiar blue scrubs, her white hair in its usual neat bun. She smiled and waved, but something about the gesture seemed wrong, mechanical, like someone copying a movement they'd only seen in pictures. When I walked toward her table, she was gone, leaving behind only an untouched cup of coffee that was ice cold to the touch. Around 2 a.m., everything changed. Dr. Warner, our attending psychiatrist, called me for a consultation because a patient was showing unusual physical symptoms alongside psychological distress. Michael Reeves, I'll never forget that name. When I entered his room, I found a middle-aged man sitting unnaturally still on the examination table, his spine too straight, his breathing too measured. "Mr. Reeves," I said, checking his chart, "I understand you're experiencing anxiety symptoms." He turned to look at me with eyes that were too focused, too aware for someone in crisis. That's what they're calling it, he replied in an unnervingly calm voice. But we both know that elevated heart rate and perspiration can have other causes. Fear, for instance, rational fear. I began my examination, noting his vitals were strange, elevated but perfectly steady, as if his body was maintaining an exact level of stress. As I worked, he spoke in that same measured tone. They've been studying us for a long time, he said, learning our patterns, our relationships, our behaviors. The early ones made mistakes, small details they got wrong, but they're getting better at the impersonations now. The inconsistencies are harder to spot. Who's studying us, Mr. Reeves? I don't know what they are, he replied, but they're patient. They wait for the right moment, when you're tired, distracted, vulnerable. They use faces you know, but don't see every day. Clever strategy. Harder to spot the wrong details in someone you only see occasionally. He grabbed my arm then, his hand impossibly cold. Did you know they practice? Before they take a face, they test it out. See if anyone notices the imperfections. They'll use the same face multiple times, each version slightly different until they get it right. A chill ran down my spine, but I attributed it to fatigue. We ran our tests, found nothing physically wrong, and Dr. Warner admitted him for observation. Before I left, Reeves grabbed my arm again. Doctor, he said, have you noticed how many versions of Margaret Chen you've seen tonight? How many times have you seen her practice her own face? My blood ran cold. I hadn't told him anything about Margaret. They always start with the retired ones first, he continued. People who should be far away. People whose absence wouldn't immediately raise alarms. Then they work their way closer. Tell me, Doctor, when was the last time you looked at your own reflection? Really looked? The rest of my shift passed in a blur of routine cases. A multi-car accident brought in several traumas, and we spent the next hour in organized chaos. It wasn't until things calmed down that I noticed something odd. There were gaps in my memory of the trauma cases. I remembered working alongside Dr. Phillips, but he wasn't on the schedule that night. When I checked the treatment records, they showed I'd handled the cases alone. By 3 a.m., I was finally heading to the parking garage. St. Mary's Garage is a massive 5-level structure, with the lower levels reserved for staff. I always parked on B2, where long-term employees get assigned spots. The garage had recently undergone security upgrades after several car break-ins, including new cameras and emergency call boxes every 50 feet. The night was bitterly cold, and the garage's poor ventilation created an eerie fog as my breath mixed with the air. The fluorescent lights cast multiple shadows that seemed to move oddly in the mist. The concrete walls amplified every sound, making it impossible to tell where noises were coming from. I was halfway to my car when I heard rapid footsteps approaching. Turning around, I saw Margaret Chen hurrying toward me, still in her pediatric ward scrubs. The sight of her should have been reassuring. Margaret was a hospital legend, a nurse who had trained most of our current pediatric staff and had a reputation for being something of a guardian angel in the children's ward. "Dr. Matthews, wait," she called out, waving frantically. "Don't get in your car." I stopped, frowning. Something felt wrong, but my tired brain couldn't immediately identify what. "Margaret, what are you doing here?" She caught up to me, slightly out of breath. "Thank goodness I caught you. I saw someone break into your car earlier while you were getting coffee. They're still in there. I've been waiting to warn you." That's when the first warning bell went off in my mind. I hadn't taken a coffee break that night. I'd been too busy with patients. I looked at Margaret more carefully, trying to keep my expression neutral as my pulse began to quicken. Her appearance was perfect. The right scrubs, the familiar way she wore her hair in a neat bun, even the reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. But then I noticed her ID badge. It was our newest design, implemented just last month as part of the hospital's improved security measures. The photo showed Margaret's familiar smile, and the issue date read January 2024. Margaret Chen had retired in June 2023. I knew this with absolute certainty because I'd been on the committee that organized her retirement party. We'd all signed a giant card, contributed to her gift fund, and watched her give a tearful speech about her 3 decades at St. Mary's. Just last week, she'd posted pictures on Facebook of her new life in Florida, playing with her newborn grandchild. Reeves's words echoed in my mind. They use faces you know, but don't see every day. That's strange, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I was just looking at your beach photos yesterday. How's little Emma doing? The thing wearing Margaret's face went very still. I noticed now that it wasn't actually breathing, despite appearing out of breath moments ago. For a long, terrible moment, neither of us moved. Then its face changed. The transformation was subtle at first, skin pulling too tight across cheekbones, eyes growing larger and darker until they were like holes in its head. Its mouth stretched into something that contained far too many teeth, each one needle-sharp and gleaming in the fluorescent light. When it spoke again, its voice was Margaret's, but wrong, like multiple voices speaking slightly out of sync. "What a shame," it said. "We did so hope you checked the back seat. The others are so hungry." I ran. The sound of my footsteps was immediately joined by others, many others, echoing off the concrete walls. The fluorescent lights began to flicker and die behind me, plunging sections of the garage into darkness. I could hear movement in that darkness, swift and purposeful, keeping pace with me. As I ran, I heard something that made my skin crawl. Margaret's warm, grandmotherly laugh, but distorted, like it was being played backwards underwater. Then other voices joined in. Voices I recognized from the hospital, all laughing that same wrong laugh. They seemed to come from everywhere at once, bouncing off the walls until I couldn't tell which direction was safe. I caught glimpses of them in the strobing lights. Dozens of Margarets, each slightly different, all moving in perfect synchronization. Some wore scrubs, others street clothes. Some had her white hair in a bun, others cut short or flowing loose. Their faces were like variations on a theme, each one almost right, but wrong in small, horrifying ways. I burst through the emergency exit and collided with 2 security guards responding to my call. They caught me as my legs gave out, and I tried to warn them about Margaret and the things in the darkness, but I was hyperventilating too hard to speak. What happened next only made things more terrifying. When they reviewed the security footage, it showed me alone in the parking garage, having an animated conversation with empty air. No Margaret, no creature with too many teeth, just me, apparently talking to nothing. But they did find something disturbing. My car's back door was slightly ajar, even though I distinctly remembered locking it. The security footage showed no one approaching my car all night, yet the door was undeniably open. What's more, reviewing footage from earlier cameras showed the door closed one moment and open the next, with no indication of how it changed. I spent the next day digging through old hospital records, looking for similar incidents. What I found kept me awake for the next 2 nights. Over the past 50 years, there have been 23 reported incidents of staff members encountering people they knew in the parking garage, always during night shifts, always with warnings about their cars. In each case, security footage showed the staff member alone. 7 of those people disappeared within a week of their encounters. The most recent was in 2019, when a nurse named Sarah Kendrick vanished after reporting a strange conversation with her recently deceased father in the garage. In her final written statement, she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. She had seen her father 3 times that week, each time slightly different, as if something was practicing wearing his face. The record showed other patterns. Every major staff change at St. Mary's had been preceded by multiple sightings of the departing employee in impossible places. Every retirement, every transfer, every unexpected resignation, all followed the same pattern of duplicates appearing in the weeks before the person left. I found an incident from 1975 that really caught my attention. A maintenance worker reported seeing 5 different versions of Dr. Thomas, the chief of surgery, having a meeting in a basement storage room. When he told his supervisor, he was informed that Dr. Thomas had retired 2 weeks earlier. The worker disappeared 3 days later. Dr. Thomas was never seen again, but over the next month, 12 different employees reported brief interactions with him in various parts of the hospital. The more I dug, the more connections I found. Every person who disappeared had reported seeing multiple versions of someone they knew. Every person who transferred out suddenly had mentioned seeing their own face somewhere it shouldn't be. And in every case, security footage and photographs from the time period showed inconsistencies. People appearing in 2 places at once, faces changing between frames, ID badge photos that seemed to shift when no one was looking. Mr. Reeves was found dead in his apartment 2 days after his admission. The official cause was heart failure, but according to the police report, all the mirrors in his home had been covered. They found dozens of notebooks filled with the same message written over and over. They wear familiar faces. They practice until they get it right. But here's what terrifies me the most. I've started seeing Margaret everywhere in the hospital. Sometimes she's at the nurse's station when I arrive for my shift, but gone when I look again. Sometimes she's walking down the corridor, but a different version of her is already around the corner. Yesterday, I saw 3 different versions of her having a conversation in the cafeteria, each with slightly different features, all going silent when they noticed me watching. This morning, I asked another nurse about Margaret's retirement party. She remembered it clearly, but all the details were wrong. She described a party in the cafeteria with chocolate cake. I remember it being in the conference room with vanilla. When I checked the photos on my phone from the party, they showed both the events somehow happening simultaneously. Margaret in 2 places at once, her face slightly different in each image. The ID badge I took from my car that night sits in my desk drawer now, sealed in a plastic bag. This morning, I decided to look at it one last time, to prove to myself it was real. But when I opened the drawer, I found something else. A new badge issued tomorrow, with my face on it. Except it's not quite my face. The smile is wrong. The eyes are too dark. And when I counted, I found 38 teeth. I'm leaving St. Mary's tonight. I've already booked a flight to another country. This recording will serve as my final warning, because I've learned something else from my research. These things, whatever they are, they don't just imitate people we know. Sometimes they replace them entirely, and they're getting better at it. Each version is more perfect than the last. They practice and practice, wearing our faces like masks, learning our mannerisms, our histories, our relationships. They study us until they can become us. I've started noticing other staff members acting strange, making small mistakes about their own lives, forgetting details they should know. Yesterday, Dr. Warner called his wife by the wrong name. Nurse Jenkins couldn't remember where she parked her car, the same spot she's used for 6 years. Small things, almost unnoticeable, unless you know what to look for. Think about it. After all, there might be a reason you feel compelled to look in your back seat tonight. There might be a reason that face in your ID badge doesn't look quite right anymore. There might be a reason you can't quite remember the details of your last shift, or why your co-workers sometimes look at you like they don't quite recognize you. And if you work the night shift, well, I hear there's an opening at St. Mary's now. They're always looking for new faces to wear. One last thing, if you think you're safe because you don't work at St. Mary's, think again. I checked the records one final time before leaving. St. Mary's isn't the only hospital with these stories. They're everywhere now, wearing faces they've practiced to perfection. And they're getting hungry for new ones. Sweet dreams. And don't forget to count your teeth. This is it, guys. Hope you liked the story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new nightmare. Good luck.